Welcome to That One Story. Today's story will make you stop and think. Like, subscribe, and let's get into it. Mara adjusted her scarf, fingers trembling slightly from the cold airport air as she tucked her boarding pass into the inside pocket of her coat. She looked tired, not just from the red-eye flight, but from life itself. There was a gentleness in the way she moved, unhurried, respectful, the kind of grace that came not from elegance, but from endurance. At first glance, she didn't look like someone meant for first class. Her coat was clean but worn. Her boots had seen a few winters too many. And her suitcase, a modest canvas roller bag, bore the frayed edges of a dozen budget flights. But her ticket was real, printed, verified, and marked clearly. Seat 2B, first class. It was a gift from her husband. She hadn't seen him in over 4 months. He'd been working long hauls with the airline, rising in the ranks from co-pilot to captain, flying farther and more often. Last week, he'd called from a layover in Paris, voice hoarse with exhaustion but warm with pride. "Mara, I got promoted, full captain now. I'll be flying Flight 782 out of JFK next Thursday. I arranged something for you. Check your email." There it was, a first-class ticket with her name on it. Her husband Luca never forgot how hard things had been when they first started out, sleeping in the back of a car, counting coins to split takeout, watching dreams feel miles away. So now that he was flying high, literally, he wanted to share a piece of that sky with her. But not everyone believed she belonged up there. Mara reached the gate just as the first-class passengers were being called. She stepped forward, holding her pass with both hands like a peace offering. The gate agent, a young woman named Shelby, bright lipstick and an even brighter smile, looked up and gave Mara a once-over that wasn't subtle. Her eyes paused a beat too long on the scuffed bag, the patched scarf, the deep lines around Mara's eyes. "This line is for first class," Shelby said sweetly, but with a flatness that drained the sweetness of any warmth. "I know," Mara replied, lifting her pass. Shelby took it, scanned it, frowned. "Are you sure this is yours?" she asked. This was upgraded. That usually only happens for status holders or employees. "I'm sure," Mara said quietly. Behind her, someone huffed. A man in a suit with perfect hair, holding a leather briefcase worth more than Mara's car, rolled his eyes. "Can we not hold the line, please?" Shelby leaned closer. "Ma'am, if this was given to you by someone else, that doesn't necessarily entitle you to—" "It was from my husband," Mara interrupted, voice cracking just slightly. Another agent stepped over, a man this time, and whispered to Shelby. She hesitated, sighed, and finally nodded. "Fine. Go ahead." Mara thanked them softly and walked toward the jet bridge, heart pounding, cheeks burning. She didn't turn to see the eyes following her. She didn't want to see the contempt, the quiet mocking. She had learned to live under the radar. Invisibility had its own armor. As she stepped into the cabin, the first-class flight attendant, a woman named Tanya, greeted her with professional warmth, until she looked at Mara's ticket. Her smile faltered, then returned, thinner. "Right this way," Tanya said, guiding her to 2B with the kind of polite stiffness used for children who'd wandered into places they didn't understand. Mara settled into the soft leather seat and folded her hands in her lap. Her roommate, a woman in pearls and a blazer, offered a curt nod before returning to her tablet. It didn't matter, Mara told herself. She wasn't here for anyone else. And yet, as passengers continued boarding, Mara could feel their gazes like needles. The man in the suit from earlier passed her row and made a dramatic double-take. "Oh," he muttered. "Interesting." Mara pretended not to hear. Tanya returned with a tray of orange juice and champagne, but when she offered it to Mara, she hesitated again. "We usually serve champagne up here," she said pointedly, offering Mara only the juice. Before Mara could respond, another flight attendant leaned into the cabin from the galley and called out, "Tanya, the captain asked for a moment before we finish pre-departure service." "Tell him I'll be there in a minute," Tanya replied, still watching Mara. Her tone softened a little. "You know, we don't usually have guests like you up here. You might be more comfortable in the main cabin." "I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be," Mara said, her voice quiet but unshaken. Tanya blinked, taken aback. Just then, the intercom buzzed to life, and a deep, confident voice filled the cabin. "Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is your captain speaking. Welcome aboard Flight 782 to Los Angeles. This is a special flight for me, and I'd like to take a moment to personally acknowledge someone on board." There was a pause. "In seat 2B, there is a woman who believed in me when I had nothing. She stood by me when we lived on pennies and chased dreams that seemed impossible. She is my wife. And today, I have the honor of flying her across the country in the seat she deserves." The cabin fell into stunned silence. Mara stared ahead, frozen. The woman next to her slowly turned, her mouth slightly open. Even Tanya, proud, polished Tanya, looked like the wind had been knocked out of her. The captain continued, "So if you see her smile today, just know it's because I finally got to return a fraction of what she's given me. Enjoy the flight." Then, a soft chime. The cabin lights flickered briefly, and the voice was gone, but its echo stayed. Mara blinked away the tears threatening to fall, lifting her chin just slightly. Around her, the stares had changed. Not judgment now, but shame, wonder, even admiration. She didn't say a word. She didn't need to. For the first time in a long while, Mara let herself breathe. She didn't turn to look at the passengers around her, but she could feel it, a subtle shift in the air, like the weight of assumptions lifting off her shoulders. It was strange, the way a few words from a voice overhead could rewrite the entire atmosphere of a room, or in this case, a plane. Tanya, the flight attendant who had tried to gently usher her out of first class, stood stiffly near the galley, her posture now unreadable. When she finally approached again, her smile had changed. Less performance, more sincerity. "Can I get you that champagne now?" she asked softly, setting it down before Mara could answer. Mara nodded politely. "Thank you." The man in the suit, the same one who'd scoffed at her in line, was seated across the aisle. He avoided her gaze now, eyes buried in the in-flight magazine like it suddenly held the secrets of the universe. His earlier arrogance had melted into quiet discomfort. The woman in pearls beside her offered a stiff smile. "You must be very proud," she said, as if making peace. "I am," Mara replied. She looked out the window, past the wing, into the endless sky beyond. The engine's hum was a soft lullaby, but inside her mind, memories stirred awake. The last few years with Luca hadn't been easy. People only ever saw the polished parts, the pilot's uniform, the announcements, the smiling photos from exotic layovers. They didn't see the nights he came home exhausted, slumped against the wall, whispering that he didn't think he'd ever make it. They didn't hear the arguments, not about love, but survival, bills, training costs, time apart, regret. And yet, they'd made it through. She remembered their tiny apartment above a noisy deli, the ceiling that leaked every spring, the smell of oil and fried onions always clinging to their clothes. They used to lie awake at night listening to the trains roll past, dreaming of a better life. Every month they chipped away at Luca's aviation school debt while she worked 2 jobs, one at the bakery, the other cleaning offices at night. One winter, Luca almost quit. He came home one night after a failed simulator exam, drenched in sleet, shoes falling apart, hands shaking. "I can't do this, Mara," he had said, eyes hollow. "I'm wasting our life chasing something that'll never happen." She'd knelt in front of him, pulled his hands into hers. "If you stop now, that's the waste," she told him. "You were born to fly. I'll carry us until you can." And she had. Now, here they were, thousands of feet in the air, the same sky they'd always looked up at, only this time, they were part of it. About an hour into the flight, Tanya approached again, this time without the mask of practiced professionalism. "I just wanted to say, I didn't know," she said, voice quiet. "About you. About the captain." Mara gave her a small smile. You weren't supposed to. I'm just a passenger. Tanya's eyes flicked to the aisle. Some people up here, they think first class is about money or status, but sometimes it's about something else. Mara didn't respond. She didn't need to lecture anyone. Life had a way of teaching its own lessons. Later, as the crew prepared for meal service, a whisper seemed to ripple through the cabin. She's the captain's wife, someone murmured behind her. Another replied, No way. That's her? The one in 2B? It was strange how people's behavior shifted once they learned a story. One man, who'd barely spared her a glance before, now reached over and offered her a warm smile. Your husband sounds like a great man, he said. He is, Mara replied. By the time dessert was served, she wasn't invisible anymore, but she didn't feel like a spectacle either. Just seen. The seatbelt sign flicked on as the plane hit a patch of turbulence, jostling lightly. Tanya came down the aisle, checking belts. She stopped briefly at Mara's seat, crouched slightly, and whispered, The captain asked if you'd like to visit the cockpit after landing. Just say the word. Mara's heart jumped. She hadn't stepped into a cockpit since Luca's graduation day, back when he wore a cheap uniform and a borrowed tie, grinning like a child as he posed for pictures in front of the flight deck. Now he was captain. He wasn't borrowing dreams anymore. He was living them. Mara nodded. I'd like that. Good, Tanya said, smiling more genuinely this time. He's excited to see you. As night fell and the cabin dimmed, Mara reclined her seat slightly, resting her head against the window. The lights of cities flickered below like distant stars, reminding her of all the places they'd been, and the ones they hadn't reached yet. She thought about everything it had taken to get here, the sacrifices, the small humiliations, the quiet resilience, and she realized something she hadn't before. She didn't care about first class. Not really. She cared about what it meant. Not money, not luxury, but proof. Proof that the life she believed in was real. That love, when built on sacrifice and belief, could take you somewhere higher than you ever imagined. The wheels touched down in Los Angeles with a soft thud, the cabin filling with the subtle pressure of deceleration. Passengers stirred, stretching limbs and turning on phones, the usual post-landing shuffle beginning. But Mara sat still. Her fingers trembled slightly as she folded her tray table and adjusted her scarf again. More from nerves now than cold. She kept her gaze low while the other passengers began gathering their things. Tanya returned and knelt beside her seat, speaking gently. If you're ready, I can take you up now. Mara nodded and rose slowly, reaching for her modest bag, though Tanya quickly took it from her. The passengers around them watched, some pretending not to, others openly curious. There were no more whispers, only a quiet, respectful silence that hung in the air like mist. Tanya led her past the curtain separating first class from the rest of the plane. As she passed through the narrow aisle, Mara caught the eyes of the gate agent, Shelby, who had boarded the plane during taxi. She looked stunned, arms crossed, watching Mara with the unmistakable expression of someone trying to reconcile their assumptions with the truth now laid bare. The cockpit door was open, and there he was, Luca. He stood tall, still wearing his headset around his neck, his captain's stripes crisp on his shoulders. But his smile, that smile, melted every mile that had ever been between them. My girl, he said, his voice low, thick with emotion. Mara didn't care about the watching eyes. She stepped into the cockpit and into his arms like she'd done 100 times before. But this time, it felt different. This time, she belonged there. He held her tightly, pressing his forehead to hers, whispering, I told the crew to make sure you were taken care of. She chuckled softly against his chest. Well, let's just say they're reconsidering a few things now. Luca pulled back slightly, looking at her with a mix of pride and apology. I'm sorry you had to go through that. I'm not, she replied. They needed to. Luca's co-pilot gave them a nod and a smile, discreetly stepping out to give them a moment alone. The cockpit, with its maze of blinking lights and quiet beeps, felt sacred now, not just a place for flying, but a testament to how far they had come. Mara looked around, taking in the view from the captain's chair. You really did it. We really did it, she thought, but didn't say. Luca reached over to one of the laminated checklists clipped to the console and pulled something out from behind it. A small photo, folded and worn. He handed it to her. It was a picture of them, from years ago, standing in front of a tiny beat-up car, arms wrapped around each other, both grinning with wind-blown hair and dirt on their clothes. Back when the dream was still just talk between shifts, and their future was measured in months, not miles. I keep it here for every flight, he said, to remember who I'm doing this for. Mara stared at the photo, her throat tight. You've always been doing it for both of us. Luca touched her cheek. I know. That's why I wanted you up front today, not just to see me, but to remind everyone, and maybe even remind you, that you belong in this part of the sky. She felt tears coming and didn't fight them this time. They weren't from sadness or pain. They were from being seen, truly seen, not just as a wife or a passenger or a woman who looked like she didn't belong, but as the person who helped build this flight, brick by invisible brick. A quiet knock came at the cockpit door. It was Tanya. We're ready to disembark, Captain, whenever you are. Luca looked at Mara. Come walk off the plane with me? Mara hesitated. You don't have to, he said, but I want them to see who you are, not as my wife, but as the reason I'm standing here in this uniform. She nodded slowly, emotion swelling in her chest. They stepped out of the cockpit together, side by side. The silence in the cabin was deafening as the passengers caught sight of them. Some eyes widened, others dropped in shame. Tanya stood at the front, arms at her sides, looking more humbled than anyone. Shelby was still there too, the gate agent from earlier, her mouth slightly open, blinking rapidly. Luca didn't speak. He didn't need to. He simply placed his hand at the small of Mara's back and guided her gently down the aisle, past the first-class seats, past the people who doubted her, mocked her, misjudged her. And as they stepped off the plane together, Luca whispered just for her, Next time you fly with me in the jump seat, front row. Mara laughed through her tears. I'd like that, she said. Outside the terminal, the California sun poured down in golden waves, casting long shadows across the tarmac. Mara blinked against the brightness, the sudden warmth kissing her cheeks as she and Luca stepped out of the jet bridge and into the open air. There was no crowd, no reporters or fanfare, just silence, sun, and the knowledge that something had changed, not just for her, but for the people left behind on that plane. Luca squeezed her hand. I have 2 hours before I'm due for debrief. Want to get breakfast? There's a quiet place I like near the hangar. Mara smiled. Only if they serve real coffee. None of that machine sludge you pilots swear by. He laughed, the sound easy and full, like the way he used to laugh back when life hadn't worn them down so thin. They do, and pancakes the size of your face. As they walked together toward the shuttle, Mara glanced back briefly at the jet, a gleaming silver body, proud and still, like a monument to the journey they had taken. But the real monument was standing beside her. At the diner, seated at a corner booth with chipped tabletops and faded photos of aviation legends on the walls, Mara stirred her coffee while Luca devoured his pancakes like a man on his last meal. It felt surreal, sitting here with him. No layovers, no long-distance calls, no countdown clocks. Just time. Just them. So what did they say? Luca asked between bites. After I made the announcement? Mara sipped her coffee slowly. You could hear a pin drop. I think you knocked the wind out of them. He smirked. Good. I wanted to. Then his face softened. But mostly, I just wanted you to know. I didn't forget. Any of it. The sacrifices. The days you carried us. Mara looked down, a bittersweet ache rising in her chest. You never made me feel forgotten, Luca. Just invisible sometimes. Not by you, by everything else. He reached across the table, took her hand, calloused fingers wrapping around hers. You were never invisible. You were the reason I saw the path. They sat in silence for a moment, the kind that doesn't need to be filled. Outside, planes roared in the distance. Travelers passed in and out of the terminal. Life kept moving. And yet, for Mara, something inside had finally landed. Over the next few weeks, something strange began to happen. It started with a message from Tanya, the flight attendant, a brief email that read, "Thank you for the lesson. I was wrong, and I'll carry that with me." Then came a letter forwarded from the airline's customer relations team, handwritten by a passenger in first class who had witnessed the entire flight. A woman who confessed that she, too, had once misjudged someone based on appearance, and that Mara's quiet strength had shifted something in her heart. And finally, a request. The airline wanted to feature Luca in their internal magazine, a piece about his rise through the ranks. But Luca had conditions. I'll only do it, he said, if Mara is part of the story, not just as my wife, but as the reason I made it at all. They agreed. And so, a month later, Mara stood beside Luca at a photo shoot in front of the hangar, his captain's uniform pristine, her smile proud. The headline beneath the image would later read, "The woman in 2B, the heart behind the wings." Life didn't suddenly become a fairy tale. Mara still lived simply. She still wore the same scarf, still used the same canvas suitcase. But something inside her had changed. Not because others now respected her, but because she had reclaimed something they couldn't take from her anymore. Her place, her worth, her story. One afternoon, as she waited at home for Luca to return from another cross-country flight, she found herself scrolling through a forum where travelers shared experiences. Someone had posted anonymously about a woman in first class who looked out of place but turned out to be married to the captain. The responses were mixed. Shock, admiration, even a few cynics. But one comment stood out. It read, "Maybe we should stop deciding who belongs based on how they look. Some people aren't just passengers. They're the reason someone else is flying at all." Mara sat back, a quiet smile on her face. She didn't reply. She didn't need to. She just closed her laptop, opened the window, and let the sound of the sky drift in.